So yeah, the mic has messed up again. All the original audio that used to be there now does not exist at all. So unfortunately what that means is that you're going to have a voiceover where I'm going to try as best as I can to remember and to follow the arrows that are that you'll see on the screen and to describe kind of what my thinking was. This is a Lonewolf Chess League game, which is a 30+30 time control. I didn't really have any time to research my opponent, so I figured I'd just stick with some standard stuff that I know pretty well, given that I'm facing an opponent that's 100 rating points higher than I am. So Queen's Gambit time, baby! He goes with the typical Queen's Gambit declined, leaving open the Alapin variation, leaving open a Nimzovich. Lots of different options here, so I just stick with a typical knight c3. He responds with knight f6. Knight f3 takes us into the three knights variation. I've seen c takes d before quite a bit, and here I was a little confused because it seems a little premature to play knight d7. So I was thinking about just making a standard passive developing move, keep it kind of simple, but I tried to think about, is there a way that I can take advantage of the knight on d7? I figured maybe one of his thoughts was to play the Tarrasch defense and just give it a little extra defense by having the knight cover the c5 square. So I thought about actually plopping my knight in on e5 and preparing for takes. Lots of different variations. And at this point, I don't think that I thought it was worth putting the knight in an advanced position when I didn't really have to. So I'm just thinking it out and calculating. I can't remember exactly what I was saying, but I look confused. I think I'm just calculating though. Yeah, as you can tell, my calculation skills are not exactly the best. So it takes me a little while, and then I end up having to think about it. I figured I should really consider developing the dark square bishop before advancing the pawn to e3. I think at this point I've pretty much put the idea of knight e5 in the back of my mind and said, well, I can always play that later. Let's just play a developing move on the queen side. Pinning the knight to the queen. Typically what happens is the pawn, the black plays h6 and you respond by backing off the bishop to h4 and just kind of see how the game goes from there. At this point, I think I'm just thinking, did I want to play a Catalan sort of a variation and open up the g2 square by pushing g3, opening up the fianchetto for the light square bishop? But at that point, it didn't seem like too good of an idea because the light square bishop doesn't really have a lot of scope on that long diagonal with the pawn structure being the way that it is. He ended up responding with bishop e7, which is a pretty standard response. If white just wants to be very solid and passive, get ready to castle and just say, let's continue the game. Frees up the pin, kind of takes away any e4 ideas. You kind of just have to wait. So at this point, I thought about the John Bartholomew move of c takes d and have a series of trades with the dark square bishops, with the knight on c3, the knight on f6. And I did decide to take. Look at there. I didn't remember doing that, but that's okay. So now expecting that if knight takes, I was just calculating, I would have to pretty much take with the bishop first, because then there's pressure on the queen, and it gives me time to take back with the knight if I wanted to. But he elected to take back with the pawn. So at this point, it's a pretty balanced structure. I have a slightly stronger potential center, but now the bishop's kind of getting a little loose. It is still protected by the knight on f3, but I don't really want the knight of f3 to stay there forever and ever. So still calculating what would all of this look like. If knight e5, then the knight takes, pawn takes, attacking the knight on f6, but there would be the potential to push the black pawn on d5 to d4, putting more pressure on the knight on c3, and if the knight were to move, then it gives the the black knight on f6 the ability to move somewhere else. So at this point I elected just to play a little more solid, a little more safe, typical queen pawns move. Preparing to move the bishop out either to d3 or to b5, pinning the other knight, and getting ready to castle. So black has elected to castle. At this point I just continue with the plan. Prepare to castle myself. Development is pretty even. If anything, I have a slight advantage by his light square bishop not being developed yet. He plays that h6 move that we talked about. I stuck with the plan of just backing off, maintaining some pressure on the f6 knight and the dark square bishop behind it. I thought c6 was a little strange just because it seems a little slow, I guess, allowing me to catch up on development. Here I think I'm actually ahead in development because he still has a light square bishop that's kind of locked in. I almost expected him to play like a Queen's Indian sort of a move like b6, allowing the light square bishop to move out to b7, get that fianchetto, and put some pressure on the long diagonal, but he elected not to do it. And so at this point I was kind of thinking, what are you doing with your light square bishop? What's your long-term plan there? It's going to be kind of slow. So I'm just calculating all the potential moves, all the possibilities. He's got a lot of pressure on, or a lot of defense on the f6 square. And I'm just thinking for a while. I don't know why. Still considering the knight to f5. If knight takes, then there's still a lot of pressure on knight f4, and then we would be able to bring the pawn over to add a little bit more pressure. I thought typical moves in this kind of a structure are moving the rooks to the semi-open C file, the semi-open E file, just getting ready for a long game of trying to control the center. I started noticing at this point that there is scope for the bishop to have some view of h7, and so if I could possibly remove the knight on f6 through however I can, then I would be able to exert some threat to move the queen to d3 and just be able to have access to h7. So I think my thought was knight to e5, and then I had to go to the bathroom. So yeah, knight to e5, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, and then the queen would be able to have some scope, but it would take a long development. So here I was surprised that he moved the same pawn twice in a series of two or three moves, right? Why move from c7 to c6 to c5 just to exert some pressure on the d4 pawn? So here I was thinking, how can I take advantage of that and use my increased tempi to be able to take control of the center and start to exert some control? I thought about if he decides to take with the c pawn. If he decides to take d4, I could actually take back with the queen and have some control over the center, but it seemed a little dangerous. So I just thought I'd calculate it out and think about it. Still calculating. I thought maybe he's not actually trying to take, maybe he just wants to kind of invade and take some space, taking away the queen on d3 idea. So I thought, let's jump into the center, try and set up kind of an outpost square. If he does take with the knight, then I can take back with the pawn. Kind of doubling up on that knight and hoping to win 2 pieces for a piece and a pawn. Actually, 3 pieces for a piece and a pawn, but very interesting. It's kind of a neat game. My opponent was pretty strong. I was kind of happy with my time management for the most part. I felt like I calculated most of the moves that my opponent could make in response that were logical. And just figure out how I wanted to respond accordingly. At this point, I started thinking, what if he thinks a little outside the box and just sets up a series of trades, exposing my loose bishop, my hanging bishop on h4. I would have to take back with the bishop first. So bishop takes bishop on e7, and then deal with the knight on e4 by taking and trying to isolate his pawns. He would probably isolate back. It would get a little hairy. But at this point, I'm still just waiting. I started to have some scope of maybe I could exert some pressure if he doesn't take back, if he doesn't move his knight, if he just makes kind of a nothing move somewhere else by moving the bishop to a4, pinning the knight to the rook, a series of trades, still eyeing up that h7 square with the possibility of moving the queen up to d3. Then I started calculating, where would he go? So start calculating basically, if I were able to get the queen to h7, the king would have to move over to f8. And then if that dark square bishop was still on e7, then it would be checkmate. However, in order to be able to get access to h7, you'd have to take with the bishop, take the knight on f6 with the bishop, just to remove his control of the h7 square. And then by doing that, his dark square bishop would move to f6 and would be vacating the e7 square for the king to be able to escape after that. So just kind of calculating a lot of different things out. I went back to the bishop a4 idea, just pinning the knight, but it didn't seem to make any sense at this point. And I kind of forget what I came up with. It's still his turn, that's why I'm still just calculating all the variations. Giving up 100 rating points, I'm thinking about here, getting in my own head, reminding myself to play pragmatically, play carefully. Remembering why I can't really take. Thinking, what if I just took with the pawn in response? Then he could take with the bishop. I would be able to take with, exchange the 2 knights, and everything's kind of equal. There's a slight imbalance of he has an isolated pawn on the d file. I've got connected pawns on the king side, but he actually decides to take on d4. And so here I had a choice, and I had to kind of think it out, because my original thought was to take with the queen, or the other option is to take with the pawn. But I kind of realized that if queen takes, then it took me a little while, I'm remembering now, if queen takes, then the bishop could take and it's protected and it exerts influence on the queen. I was thinking, well, then the queen could just move back, but if I do that, then the knight on e5 is hanging. So it doesn't make any sense. I was still trying to figure out how to take advantage of the weakness, the weakness that could come from on the f6 square. Let's see how long it took me to realize that the knight on e5 would be hanging if I took with the queen. It took a while, didn't it? Yeah, it did. Ah, there it is. Wait, thinking about it. Maybe I already realized that I'm just calculating that pawn takes is the best move. That's probably it. Yeah, there it is. Okay. It's so funny trying to do a voiceover of my thinking afterwards, because I can't remember exactly how I thought about it and how long it took me to. I kind of remember the pathway of what I was thinking, but not exactly. It's kind of funny, actually. Yeah, I was listening back to the audio when I went to edit the video, and it came out the channel on it was really, really bad. So I figured a voiceover is the next best thing. I didn't want to waste the whole game. So yeah, little extra work for you guys in YouTube land. Hope you appreciate it. And if not, oh well, it's a little bit of fun. Man, this took me a while to think about. I'm actually kind of glad about that, because I thought about all the possibilities, all the possible variations of what if I take first, what if I take with the bishop, what if I take with the knight, and then I thought about it for a while. Thought about all his possible responses, but that bishop to c5 move is just too strong in the end. So I didn't think it made sense to take back with the queen at all. Oh, I almost did it. Wait. That's where I just realized. It took me that long to realize that if I take and he exerts pressure on the queen, then the queen would have to drop back and the knight is hanging. Wow. It took me like 5 minutes to realize that the knight would be hanging. That's so funny. Hindsight's 20/20, I guess. That's hilarious. And I did end up taking with the pawn. Good. All right. So here I'm just running through all those lines that I thought about before. If I could get the queen to d3 and take the knight, then I would have access to h7 and be able to exert that plan that I was talking about before. I still wasn't sure if it was good or not. I just knew that it was a possibility, and it looks aggressive, and there's a lot of opportunity for the opponent to blunder. I still wasn't sure if I wanted to do it or not, but at this point the game's pretty even. The C file is open, the E file is open. We both have isolated pawns in the D file. My pieces are a little more in his camp than his are in mine, so he's a little more passive. I've got a little more activity, but he does have a rook exerting some influence on the E file already. I guess the biggest difference in this game is that his bishop still has not developed yet, and I kind of didn't really want that to happen. So I didn't really want to take with the knight. Knight takes knight, because then it would allow his late score bishop to advance, to develop. And being that he's behind a development, I didn't really want to do that. I didn't really want to let him off the hook like that. So I calculated all these variations and trying to think about, if I got the queen to d3, is there a forcing checkmate line, and kind of came to the conclusion that there's really not. It would just be a series of trades, and yes, I've got a queen deep in Black's camp, but at this point his king is moving to the center, and it seems like he's got a nice little shelter, and I've kind of given away all my pieces. And so the more pieces you give away, the less attack you're going to have. So here I'm just waiting and trying to stay engaged, thinking it through, trying to think about all the possible variations for him and for me. What could I do? What could he do? Still thinking through everything. Talked a lot about a few different things. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I was really into it. Look at that. Oh, here I start talking about all my swag. Check it out on the Stream Store, said Nominee at Stream Elements Store. Get your Angry Rook t-shirts and Angry Queen placemats and tea mugs and all kinds of stuff. Really cool hoodies. I think my kids were asking me for something here, so I was talking to them a little bit. And telling them to go away, I think. And then I'm like, okay, what am I doing? Am I playing chess? I got distracted by merch and swag and kids and whatever. So now I'm just rethinking the entire position over again, I think. I probably was wondering myself, is the microphone still working, or is it having that robotic issue all over again? And just waiting for my opponent to make a move. I wonder if I should cut this part out, being that there's not really much happening. Still just continuing to think about the d3 square, the possible rook moves, rook to the c file, the a rook to the c file, the f rook to the e file. Trying to take over some open files for long-term development. Still having in mind that queen move, though. Oh, yeah. Just recalculating everything that I had run before. A few different variations of it with move order. If he were to take with the knight, I would take back with the pawn. Could I take back with the bishop first to be able to get away with it? What would moving the rook to the e file change in all those scenarios? Just thinking it through. Here I thought there was a big threat of something, but I can't remember what it was. Yeah, still looking at the b3. The Queen's Indian sort of style. Oh, that's an interesting thought. If he doesn't do anything, like if he just plays b3 or something, could I actually take with the bishop, forcing his bishop to move in, move queen to h5, threatening to take on h7, being that the knight is there, exerting influence on h7, then just being able to get a check in. But it doesn't really lead to anything, so I wasn't really thinking about it too carefully. Just waiting and calculating, waiting and calculating. Checking my phone, getting distracted, talking about stuff. Here, I guess it's good that it was even on time. I just realized that he did take. And here I started thinking about a few different possibilities, a few different moves. Not realizing that I pretty much have to take back. That was the whole plan. So let's see how I calculate and how I calculate the variations. I remembered the first move was that. What if he pushes the pawn first? Then I take. He takes, I take. He would be able to take the knight. I would take back with the pawn at that point. And then I just start to calculate what material would be given away in that variation. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I have to take back. I can't just let there be Nothing there. So I have to remember that my bishop is hanging. It kind of makes it a little easier to calculate. But I didn't want to be too impulsive, so I just kind of rechecked everything, and then made a decision of, oh yeah, I pretty much got to take it. It's hanging. Kind of have to take that. So I think I was thinking about rook e1, just protecting the pawn on e5, but then I realized it's not really protecting it because then there's actually 3 pieces attacking it, and I've only got 1 defending it. So then I start to think about, what if I attack the queen first, forcing him to take with the queen? Is there some kind of an attack I could get with that, some kind of a series of exchanges? But at some point I realized that if the queen takes on e5, that means that he's also defending the c7 square. So then it doesn't really make sense. So then I started going back to my queen d3 idea of exerting influence on h7. And if the queen doesn't take yet, if he takes back with the knight, then queen h8 is actually mate because the queen doesn't have an escape square. Thought about all of his possible responses, g3, g6 being probably the easiest idea to find, of just blocking off that entire diagonal and making a series of exchanges not worth it, giving me time to try and protect with other things, maybe take with the knight on d5 and then moving back to, let's say, e3 maybe, or just back to c3. So I thought, let's give it a try. We'll see if we can get some influence over the h7 square, utilize what we got. Hey, quiet. I'm recording. Thank you. Go out the back door. Okay. Yeah, wait for Mama at the back door. Back door. So just trying to calculate all the different variations, all the different possibilities of move order, but kind of realizing that if the knight does take, it's kind of checkmate in 2, so I didn't expect him to do that, but just what's everything that could possibly happen. I still expected pawn g6 to just shut down that threat, kind of make it like, why'd you move your queen to the center? Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense now, does it? Okay, so he did take with the queen on e5, allowing me to have a real possibility of queen to h7. But now queen to h8, after the king moves to f8, queen h8, the king does have an escape square now of e7. So then I started to think, what does that do to the position? What does that change now? And if the king goes there, then I do have that opportunity to have the rook exert some influence, pinning the queen to the king, setting up an exchange. And I was kind of afraid that there could be some back rank mate issues, not even realizing at that point that the king is still on e7. So I kind of dismissed that idea and was really debating whether this was worth it or not. Was it just a big series of trades? Should there be something else that I should be doing? But it was just so aggressive, and I think he had underestimated the threat of it. So I'm just trying to take my time, be careful, really think it all through. Is there some way that I could exert influence over the queen now? But I kind of realized attacking the queen now just leaves the back rank mate issue. So I thought, well, let's just do it. And this was the plan. What am I waiting for? Oh, I think I'm just now realizing that if the king moves to e7, that the queen is hanging on h8 because the rook is attacking it. But I'm also realizing that now that because the king is on e7, it takes away the back rank mate issues. And I'd be able to get a check-in. Which probably is the best idea. Because then you have an aligned rook on e7, you know, the a rook on e7. And the queen aligned on e8. So I'm just calculating all the variations, trying to figure it all out. It took a little while. And it's funny, you'll see what happens. I want to see if I can pinpoint the exact moment that I realized I have another resource available. I knew it was pretty advantageous, but I just wasn't sure how advantageous it was. I definitely didn't want to make a mistake and leave my queen hanging and not have anything going back. Then I just realized that if he doesn't do anything and if he just allows the queen trade, then I'm taking with the rook and he can take back with the knight. And then I'm not really gaining even not even winning an exchange or anything. At that point, it's not even an even trade because his queen is protected, mine's not. So I'd just be giving away a rook in that case. And now here's where I just realized I have another resource in the game. I actually have a knight that could take on d5 when the king is on e7 and just be able to have some influence over giving check and changing the move order slightly. But there was a move I did not see coming. I thought he would just move like his king to f6 or something like that. Yeah. Let's see the look on my face when I don't see what his best response is. Thinking it through, calculating. And what I was actually hoping for is that if I take d5 with the knight, that if the queen takes, then the rook can actually take on e1, or can give check on e1, and then I get that alignment that I was talking about with the queen and the rook both aiming at e8. And then I just have a decent advantage. I've sacked a piece, but the king is kind of in the center. I've got connected queens and rooks. So just continuing to think about what would happen if to calculate, and I kind of at this point was just making the decision that it's so aggressive and it's such a way to get the king out into the center. I know that you're not really supposed to do things without calculating it out fully and really calculating to mate, but I just felt like I would get some dynamic advantage by being threatening and aggressive. I don't really know if that's the right way to think about it. Let me know. What do you guys think in the comments? Curious. Yeah, again, I was still trying to think what are all the possible things that the queen can do if the queen were to take the knight after it takes on d5. So the line I was calculating here was queen h8. Oh, and then I did think about it. Oh, I didn't even realize I did that. For the first time, I realized, what if he doesn't take the knight? What if he just goes king d6? Then my queen is hanging. I can't go back to g7. I was like, you know what? The chances that he'll find that, and then I'll just be able to figure out what to do after that, are very slim, but let's give it a try. I want to see the moment where I realize the impact of my choice here. Yeah, I was thinking if he moves his king to anywhere else, because he can't actually move, he cannot move his king to f3, and then I was like, oh, he did see it, no. So now 2 pieces are hanging, and I think I just realized that. In this case, the queen is hanging and the knight is hanging, so I'm gonna have to sacrifice something. Do I try and protect the knight with the rook on rook d1, or like rook a to d1, threatening a reveal, check of the king, and try and capture something back, but the knight's not in the right spot to like attack the queen. That's really the only thing that makes it worth it. So eventually I end up with the calculation of, do I want to get rid of my queen, or do I want to let my queen get taken, or do I want to let my knight get taken? That's the only choice at this point. I tried to calculate a bunch of different variations and get aggressive, but it just didn't happen. I mean, so what's the compensation for this, right? Compensation is, okay, I sacked a piece, but I've got a lot of pieces that have access to that king, that have a lot of scope to the king. He doesn't really have a whole lot of defenders, and I've got some pieces that move quickly in straight lines that could be around the king. So you could say it was a legitimate sacrifice. Try and get the king into the center. However, I just didn't calculate that if both pieces would be hanging at the same time. I actually thought about moving it. Look at this. What was I thinking? Like, wait a minute. No, then the queen's still hanging. What am I doing? What if I try and take his queen? And then he takes, and then I take, and then he moves his rook with checkmate on the back rank. That doesn't work. So then I'm like, okay, yeah, it's just the decision of, do I let the knight get taken or do I let the queen get taken? You have to decide. Preserve the most attacking piece. Goodbye, knight. And hopefully you can make the compensation worth it. So I'm actually pretty proud that I calculated all of his possible moves. I figured he'd just take, with the knight, take the knight with the king or with the queen, whatever. They both kind of work. I suppose taking with the king is kind of better because then your queen doesn't get pinned to the king after rook a to d1. So yeah, king takes. Yeah, before I was trying to calculate if knight to f6, then it's attacking the queen. Queen could take on g7, pinning the knight to the whatever. But then the rook could come over, and so then where would I play? And I realized the queen's got a lot of scope to be able to get out. Now I thought about the queen giving check to d3. Just getting more active, but I thought getting another piece with some scope in the game would probably be a good thing. And it's so funny because later in the computer analysis, neither of those were the right moves. There was one move, given that the king is so in the center, that kind of takes away and restricts the movement of the king so that there would be some more aggressive attacks, but it's pretty complicated. I don't think I would have even seen it, and I still don't even think it's really much of a human move. But, whatever. So now I was thinking, okay, queen to d3 kind of fits, kind of makes sense, gets my most dangerous piece in the active squares. And I thought maybe I can, do something with this bishop on a4, attacking the king, skewering him to the knight, but then I just realized that it allows that light square bishop to kind of take back and get more involved in the game, and I didn't really want to do that yet. It took me a while to realize that, though. I kind of was feeling the pressure of, I just sacked a piece. You could call it a sack. I didn't realize it was a sack, but it was a sack. So do I want to give check and be more active, be more aggressive, or do I just want to get more aggressive pieces in the game? And so I was thinking about queen d3, thinking about, well, maybe I should consider this again. If I said, and this is actually the reason why I didn't play bishop a4, is because if the pawn takes, he can actually attack the bishop with a pawn to b5, given that it's protected by two pieces, the king and the queen. So that's actually the reason I decided against it. Thinking, decision-making. I kind of realized I have another check there, and that if queen takes, then I could take back with check. But then at some point I realized that that was kind of silly. It just gives away a piece and exchanges queens when he's already up a piece, and it doesn't really make sense. So then I just go with the safe move. I still thought about it even more. It's like, let's see, I'm still thinking about getting that aggressive piece to d3. I just really didn't want to give up the check that I had given such a series of checks. I felt like I was losing some initiative. So I wanted to explore every variation I could where I could keep giving check. Oops. And here I was feeling kind of defeated of, darn, I feel like I just gave away the initiative. It's not going well, guys. I'm not doing so good. I just sacked a piece. I don't have an exact mating line. His king was in the center, now it can retreat back to b8 after c7. Oh, I just wasted. I made a big mistake. Yeah, all of that's accurate. I think the analysis after the game had white still having a minor advantage, like 1.7 or something like that. Very, very slight. And I guess it's because his light square bishop is still not developed, and his rook on a1 or a8 still has not developed at all. So I guess they're still saying I've got some advantage just with development, with piece activity. But for the life of me, I couldn't figure out exactly what it was. I was calculating if I move bishop to a4. If nothing changes, like if he just moves a pawn on the king side or something, if I move bishop to a4 and he deflects with b5, and if the pawn does go to b4 like I was b5 like I was talking about, I could actually sack the bishop, and if the queen takes on b5, then I have queen to d6 because it's a protected square, and it would take away all of the king's escape squares. But then I thought, who's going to do that? He'll probably just... Actually, would have been a pretty good line, wouldn't it? Wait a minute. Is that a forcing line? Oh, because he doesn't have to take back... He doesn't have to deflect with the pawn on b5. That's why he can just go to c7. So it kind of takes the bishop, on that diagonal, but not really with any purpose or scope. Actually... No, yeah. So I could sack the bishop, or not sack, but exchange the bishop for the knight on d7. He could take back on with the light square bishop. I could take with the queen, giving check if he moved his king to c7 first, but then he's always got the b6 square to move his king to, and I don't really have any attack. Here I thought, wait a minute, what has changed? Now if the bishop moves here, I'm skewering the king and the rook. And if he tries the b4 thing, I've still got the bishop takes and then all of the attack going on. So he does go to b7. I take the rook, and I fully expected him to take back with the knight at this point. And if he does that, I can get some checks and try and get some attack and have some activity. But he takes with the queen, and very, very quickly I realized by doing that, he's actually given me a protected square and mate. And I celebrate. I was very excited. I kind of gave some pleasantries and offered to analyze. He said GG and checked out. So it was a pretty good game. I felt like I had a good combination of being aggressive and passive. And once I realized he was playing pretty passively and his pieces weren't controlled, I felt like I could play with a little bit more initiative and try and get some imbalance, get his king into the center. That's about it. Yeah, there's a whole bunch more where I'm talking to the guy and trying to figure things out. So yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure to check me out on Twitch when I stream. Here's the link below. Make sure to check out some of my other videos on YouTube, my other Lonewolf Chess Leagues. Let me know in the comments what you thought, if your analysis can figure out ways that I can improve my chess game. Check out some of the other videos I have on my YouTube channel, games from the Lonewolf Chess League, but also I'm starting a new series where I analyze different openings from 6 different levels of actual Lichess players, so that you can have some ideas of how to improve your game. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good day. Sorry about the audio again, and we'll see you guys later.